Hello everybody, my name is Hunter Hero, and welcome to my Ashened Horus deck profile for February, March format of 2024. So I recently picked up all the Ashened cards and kind of fell in love with them. I like the Dark Souls theming and all of that, and I'm not sure if it's the general consensus, but I have seen a couple of other builds online kind of going around and playing the Horus stuff, so I thought I'd throw it together. I just took first at our last locals and got a lot of testing out of the last 2 days of showing up. Matchups were kind of off meta, or like pure Snake Eye and stuff like that. But the deck does have some feet, some legs on it, and I can certainly tell you guys some of the cool things this deck can do that helps it play into the current format, as bad as it might be. So, enough idly rambling. Well, let's get into the cards. I'm going to spend probably a bit more time explaining what these cards do, just because some of these cards are new and you might not have read them yet. So, for our Ashen cards, we're playing 3 Priestess of the Ashen City. This card is Yorota. So all of the Ashen cards, Ashened, so Hero, Priestess, and King, all come with the effect that if you have the Obsidian, the Ashen City, face up on your board, then you can just special summon them from your hand once per turn, which makes them great extenders going into, like, simplified game states, which is what you're wanting with this deck. And they can only do that once per turn, but, I mean, the one-time extension's normally not that big a deal. So, what she does is that on normal or special summon, she searches any Ashen card out of your deck, except for herself, and it's a hard once per turn. Legitimately, I think the most simple card in the deck, honestly. The fact that we need names, which is the only reason we play 3 of this. It's used to reset up your board and make sure that you can ensure and kill on the crackback. She's actually not really the best thing. You don't really need a normal summon, so she's fine, but, like, in the grand scheme of things, she's not really all that great. The MVP, though, 3 Hero of the Ashen City. This card, again, has a summoning clause. He's level 7, I think. Are you? Yeah, you're level 7, so 2600 attack, 2100 defense, and what he does is that during the main phase, you can quick effect target a pyro monster on the field and just destroy it. That has a unique interaction with how the field spell works, but if that pyro monster is the big dragon that the deck plays, Veidos, the Dragon of Destruction or whatever, you then place your field spell from your deck into your field zone, which is really, really good. That's all he does, though. A lot of these cards are really simple. They have a lot of effect text on them that's just explaining how their cards work. But, so he just pops a pyro, and if it happens to just be the dragon, then you go get to place your field spell for free. And then we're playing 3 King. King is a level 8, which is the only reason we want to max him. Some people do justify cutting down, I believe it's Hero to 2. But with how your ratios need to work in this deck, 3 and 3 and 3 seems to be just the right option for me. So, he's level 8. Same special summon clause, and if you're so you can special summon a Ashen from your hand, but if your opponent has a monster with 2800 or more attack, you can special summon an Ashen monster from your deck. So this card does set up your plays going first, assuming you see Veidos. But it also then plays into helping you clean up the boards and the game if your opponent is either stuck with a Veidos on board, or if you just didn't close out a game fast enough and they reset up their board. Summoning King and then just forcing something with that is strong enough on its own. He's also a 27 wall, which is a bit low in terms of level 8 monsters, but it is enough to kind of come up because, again, you're after simplified game states with this deck. So their stats are not the best, but they're good enough for simplified game states that you don't really mind too much. Like Hero's at 2600 attack, and both of her stats are like 12 and 20 and 13 respectively. It's not very great, but the Ashen monster that you can't search are 3 copies of Veidos, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction. This card is really, really, like, deceptively strong, and it's because it provides a form of interaction in the current format that a lot of people aren't ready for. It's a level 9 Dark Pyro. It's not a dragon, but it looks like a dragon. So, with 2800 attack and 1500 defense, during the main phase, if there's a field spell, you can target one of the field spells on somebody's board, blow it up, and then summon this card to your opponent's side of the board. which is normally really bad, but it enables King, so, and your field spell. So, he's really, really good for that. And then if this card is sent from your opponent's field to your graveyard, you can then trigger his effect to just nuke, to Dark Hole the board. That's a little less practical, but if your opponent has cleared your board or something and they link this thing off, or if you use Hero Effect during the main phase to quick effect pop, then you get a Dark Hole, which helps clear up the board, and hopefully will get you another turn, which is basically all you really need in this deck, is to kind of set up a loose turn 1 board, and then just, like, nuke your opponent's stuff, and then just go in for the kill, because all your guys are, like, pretty decently big, so, yeah. For our Horus stuff, we are playing 3 copies of Im City. So just your Horus stuff, get your engine online. 1 Dwemetef, 1 Happy, and 1 Kebusebunev. You need to play every single name. Something I found out in testing is that whatever name you don't have last doubles as an extender to make SP. And that's like the one issue with this deck, is that you do need to play cards like SP Little Knight. So this entire lineup has to all be here, because they close you games, they help win simplified game states. One of the trap cards we have in our deck relies on having multiple names, and whatever name you don't end up dumping early on just gets used as an extender. So yeah, if you need to know what they do, so most of them don't do a whole lot on board. They have an effect that if your opponent sends something, they do something. Im said he draws you a card and searches King Sark from the deck, which is why you need to max out on him. And then if your opponent removes a card from your field by their card, except during the damage step, they all trigger. So Im said he non-targeting, I believe, sends a card non-targeting. Dwemetef draws you a bunch of cards, and he gains 1200 attack for every name. Happy grabs back cards from your graveyard or banished, up to 2. And Kebusebunev prevents your opponent from attacking or targeting your Horus monsters for the rest of the turn. So, and they all can summon themselves as long as you have a King Sark. So, and that's inherent. They can't chain to that. So, as for the only monster hand trap we are playing 3 copies of Skullmeister. Basically, this is personal choice. Either play Bell or Skullmeister, depending on what your scene looks like. I just prefer Skullmeister, at least where I'm at. Both have their merits in the deck, because we're not playing anything like Small World, so his stat line doesn't really matter to sign up for anything. It is just because of his use case comes up a lot more where I live. This is a flex spot. Pick whatever hand trap you please. Just don't play Ash, please. This deck loses, like, really bad to Access Scout Docker, so... moving on to our spell cards, we have 3 Awakening of the Veidos. This card is weird. This card does a lot of double duty in your deck in ways that you don't expect, and this is something that you yourselves will discover as you play this deck. Holding onto this card, if you draw multiples of it, isn't actually the worst thing. Like, normally you'd want to send it off of, like, Imseti or something, but holding a copy never hurts, because this thing doubles up as a way to interrupt field spells. So you place 1 Obsidian in either your field spell zone or your opponent's, and then if your opponent has a field spell, you go search a level 5 or higher Pyro from your deck. But then it Pyro locks you, which means that you need to move all your Horus stuff first and then activate this. But, I mean, most of the time your Horus stuff's eating all your interactions anyway, so... you can only activate 1 of these once per turn, but the reason you want to hold multiples of these is because you can then chain it to your opponent activating like a field spell or something. Place your field spell over theirs and make your opponent's field spell fail to resolve. It's a really solid play, in my opinion, and something that I did all day, which is what helped me, win locals, so... speaking of the devil, here's 3 copies of Obsidian. Obsidian? I really don't know how to pronounce this card's name. This card is fantastic. It reads super basic, but it actually enables some stuff. This is one of the few deck profiles I'll be talking about my sideboard in. But what this card enables is, during your main phase, your opponent's special summon monsters all become Pyro. So, and this applies to both players. So, on your turn, your opponent's monsters become Pyro. On their turn, your monsters become Pyro, assuming you both have Obsidian up. And then, if this card's destroyed or banished and, off the field spell zone, you summon an Ashen monster from your deck. And then during the end phase, if you have this in your field spell zone, you can just target another copy of it in your graveyard, bottom deck it, and then draw you a new card. This card keeps your engine going, helps refill your hand, and is super, super good to draw. Because if you open multiples of these and like your Horus stuff, and your opponent doesn't interact with the Horus stuff very much, you can just activate Obsidium over Obsidium and then get a free draw during your end phase, which is actually really strong. The free draws is like half the reason why I wanted to play more non-engine, but your deck just can't afford it right now. Until Wave 2, I'm assuming, but, yeah. Moving on to our spell cards for the Horus stuff. We are playing 2 Walls of the Imperial Tomb and 2 copies of King Sark. There have been a lot of lists playing 3 and 1, but, there have been many use cases where they'll clear both of these off the board, and I'll draw into M-City. So you need something to search, because Walls of the Imperial Tomb doesn't count as Sark in the deck, so you can't search it with M-City, which means that M-City is a dead draw if that happens. So this card is Rhoda, so you activate this, search a Horus monster from your deck, and then bottom deck any card out of your hand. And then it has another effect if we're playing the deity, but we aren't, so that part doesn't really matter. And then King Sark up to 4 times per turn, Foolish Burial Horus monster, and then it makes it to where all your Horus monsters, once per turn, one of your Horus monsters turns into a construct. Which helps you out in simplistic game states, big floodgates, and monsters that behave like floodgates. So like M-Pen loses to King Sark. Yeah. And then 1 terraforming. We need access to either Obsidium or the field spell, so having just a way to search it is fantastic. This deck does not really care all too much about draw. There are bad hands where you will draw and you will lose to draw, but those times are few and far in between, because if you open M-City or the Quick Play spell, you can then tailor into whichever engine that you didn't already draw. And if your opponent interacts you, if you go like M-City and then they draw you on the out of that, you can just play into your to a different end board and then just set the Awakening of the Veidos and then just interrupt them on their turn with it. So you don't really care about draw too much. And then the last 3 spell cards are 3 triple tacked. Droll sucks sometimes, but I'd rather just have this card just in case they don't droll me and I just need to draw extenders, or if they ash me in a bad spot. This is a locals tech. At higher end events, I'm not sure if we would play this still. There still needs to be more testing done. I would like your guys' thoughts on at least the triple tacks. This could be another hand trap, so just let me guys know. You guys let me know. Bleh. Moving on to the trap cards, we have 1 Ashened for Eternity. This card is the best worst card in this deck. On activation, you can add back a Veidos or an Ashened from your graveyard back to your hand. Which is one of the few ways to interact with Veidos outside of Awakening. And then what this card does is that you can then owner seal one of your monsters back from your opponent's side of the board, and then your opponent's monsters all lose attack equal to that monster's attack for the rest of the turn. It's only the monsters they currently control, sure, but this can stop OTKs on its own. I beat a Flowandries player off of just using this card, making all of his guys 0, blanking a battle phase, and getting my guy back, so... this card's really good. It's searchable. You only need the 1 of it. If you draw it, it's nice. If you don't, it's whatever. And then the other one, the reason we're playing all the names, Canoptic Protector. This card, this card's really good in specifically what this deck wants to do. You're not ending with Horus monsters stuck under monsters very often, so this card will just trigger and garner you a bunch of free advantage. This card is once per chain, so if your opponent does something to try to force it out, you activate it on like a card they're using to surge. Get the free summon, and then if they go to out it, chain this card to that effect, and then reset it using its own effect. And that way you get 2 Horus monsters, and they both get to trigger off of the Protector being removed. Which is really, really strong. It's unsearchable, and it has maybe considered running multiples, but it's just so bricky if you draw this and like both of your trap cards, so... and then 3 Infirm. You just need hand traps, and I just don't want monster-based ones, just given the fact that getting talents just sucks in this deck, because if they rip out your Im City and that was your only way to get started, you just lose the game sometimes. So just having other ways to interact with your opponent is just important. But yeah, 40 cards. Very, very consistent main deck, or at least as consistent as I can make it. Moving on to the extra deck. For our 8s, we're on Coach King Giant Trainer for drawing cards. You actually, most of the time during your first turn, will make this during your combo, which is why the extra Horus name matters, is because you use the extra Horus name in this to go into SP or IP, whichever one you want to. So it gets this thing off the board because you hate having him stick around. Hope Harbinger, spell negates. Helps you interact with Fire Kings, so that way you can interact with their field spell before they have a chance to save it or anything, which isn't too bad. He also, Lightning Rod's attacks, which actually comes up a lot more in this deck, because that way you can save your SP Little Knight by using him. One ding. Sending is really strong in this format. I don't know what to tell you. Like, sending cards is really strong. And he doubles as a protect, which means that your cards actually get more mileage out of them, which means that you don't have to like burn like Canoptic Protector's reset ability or something like that if this comes up. Doesn't come up very often, but it is nice to have. And then number 90, Photon Lord. I know a lot of this deck is going to be expensive, but this is not a cheap deck, unfortunately. I would love to prevent you budget alternatives to a lot of the cards I'm playing. But I think with the Ashen deck in its current state, I don't really think you can afford to skimp on certain options. Like, I think you can cut, like, SP, but, like, something like this, you can't live without. Sometimes you'll set up with a board where you don't need to see Giant Trainer. So you'll end on, like, this and SP Little Knight. This deck loses really hard to Nibiru during your setup combo, which isn't the end of the world. It's just annoying when it happens. So having this as a way to set up negates if you're already opened well enough is fine. And then a card that's getting cut later is the Zombie Vampire. If I owned another one, this would just be another copy of Garua, which we'll talk about that when we start moving towards the end of the extra deck and into the sideboard. This card does nothing. You don't need to resolve this card, so... and then the other exceeds is we're playing Typhon. Your guys are all big. This allows you to, and because, if you see, Awakening of the Veidos, you can just kind of go normal summon any, or special summon any guy, slap this on it, remove your opponent's problem monster, and then just use your field spell and, hero to just clear everything else out, which is a really strong interaction, and Typhon helps protect that, so this card matters a lot more than Zeus does. Into Link monsters, we are playing both Hida and Dark. Hida is only makeable if you make Giant Trainer, but there are circumstances where you will go, again, all about the simplistic game state with this deck. You can go into Giant Trainer, draw your cards, and then use this to climb an Access Code Talker to clear your opponent's board, and then just play around the Access Code Talker, just being kind of stuck there. You're more likely to make Dark, but they're both just really solid options. IPSP. The most dynamic duo from, like, the last couple, for the last format. These two don't really need much explaining to do. SP Little Knight does a lot more carrying in this deck than I thought I would. Just because it, if your opponent does something that threatens Veidos on their board, or they go to link it off, and they activate an effect on summon, you can then chain the SP Little Knight to save your monsters before Veidos resolves, and that way you can rebuild your board. And then IP just climbs into it. For our Link 3, we're playing Unicorn and Selene. Immisset uses Spellcaster, so you don't really need to worry about not having Spellcasters if you've seen your Horus engine, so Selene's always live, and Unicorn's just some of the best removal we have right now. And then the only Link 4 we're playing is Access Code Talker. You just... these decks win off of just hitting your opponent really hard, so this is just the captain of doing that. I was playing Appaloosa at one point, and every time I made Appaloosa, I lost the game because I just have no grind game after making her. So, this card's just better. Even playing around, just the fact that he just sits there sometimes is still better than not having it. And then two cards, two super poly targets, Garua and Muddragon. These are, Muddragon's being used in that, Snake Eye deck. So having one of your own is kind of not the worst. And then Garua, which is a card I wish I had multiples of. Because your opponent's cards all count as pyros, if you're going second and you open like Obsidian and two super polys and just have like free value, you can then turn into multiples of this and just kind of beat your opponent to death with these. You know, so that sort of stuff is important. So this would be what I would play. I would play a second one of this over Zombie Vampire. But yeah, so that's it for the extra deck. So now it's time to talk about something I'm not very familiar with, but the side deck. This deck, more so than a lot of other decks that I like to deck profile on my channel, lives and dies in games 2 and 3. Regardless of how your game 1 goes, I won 2 games under floodgates and stuff because you need to just kind of know how these cards interact with it, and your sideboard helps make or break your interactions between bad matchups. So like, you know, it's super standard stuff, but knowing what cards to take out is like the biggest thing. Is that like a lot of the times you're siding out your traps except for like Awakening, you're siding out one name, you know, stuff like that. So for like Droll, Droll's not super popular in this format. This is more of a format pick. You can flex this into whatever slot you need. My other thought would be like something like Nibiru, just because that way it clears the fireboard. I just prefer Droll and Lockbird over Nib. 1 Pinkertops and 2 Lightning Storm to go with it. 2 Lightning Storm to go with him. Sorry about the Super Poly. Apparently my sideboard got mixed up. These are just pure going second cards to just help push and break your opponent's board as much as you can before you dedicate to any plays. Pinkertops being a monster is the biggest deal for it. I kind of just like this ratio, even though, like, you know, Pinkertops is in multiples now, I think. You don't need more than one of him. These are, like, your going second cards for the most part. Almost everything in your sideboard. Most of the time, I'm cutting 1 name and a trap card and 1 Veidos for this, depending on if my opponent's matchup requires their field spell or not. If they don't require their field spell, don't cut Veidos. If they require their field spell, don't cut Veidos for any of your side pieces. If they do require their field spell, leave Veidos alone in the main. Cut Priestess instead. 3 Super Poly. Because your field spell turns stuff into pyros, it's really easy to make a lot of stuff off of this card. So it's just easier to just play 3 of it, go second, and just hope that you draw the field spell. You have so many ways to access it anyway that it doesn't matter. And it, you know, a lot of boards these days are being made with pyro monsters anyway. So even if you just draw it, have to activate like Awakening of the Veidos, and you're locked out of your extra deck, you can just set this. It's good enough on its own. 3 Herald of the Abyss. This is a locals thing. Do not, you could totally take this out without any issue. Towers is another thing this deck really struggles to out because towers are unaffected by your board nuke. So having access to something like Herald of the Abyss is really strong against those towers monsters. And then 3 Evenly Matched. There is just no better going second card in the game. Your deck hates floodgates. Like, I know every, like, modern deck hates floodgates, but your deck hates it just a little bit more. So having as many options to remove those floodgates is really strong. So we're playing so many board breakers just to supplement that. So yeah, that's it for this deck profile. As I'm sorting my deck back in order, I guess I'll just, I have a couple words to say, mostly about the fact that, I know I've been gone for a while. I didn't really have the motivation to make content for a little while. None of the decks I had really, like, inspired me to make content. So, now that we're hitting a pretty decent stride and we're getting closer to our states again, you'll probably be seeing a little more activity from me coming in the next coming weeks. I appreciate you guys all bearing with me and, like, you know, commenting and all that happy stuff. I'm not going to sit here and ramble much more. This video is already long enough as it is. But I just appreciate you guys bearing with me. I'm very sorry that it's taken me so long to upload more content. I'll be back on that. I have a couple other lists on the back burner that I was supposed to post earlier. I just felt the motivation to make this one now. So, yeah. That's it for me. If there's any suggestions or thoughts or anything that you have, or if you've learned anything from this deck profile that you took, changed, and then came back with, please let me know. I'm always willing to improve my deck, and especially if I'm heading into higher tier formats, I do want to try to play this deck more. So, but that's it for me. Hope you guys have a wonderful night. Take it easy.